3-week exploration of a topic that is called the 3 faces of God. Actually, this topic was chosen for us. Someone put it in our suggestion box a number of months ago, and so just so you know, it works. Okay? Hint, hint. All right. So as we look at what is called the 3 faces of God, we will talk about what that is on an intimate level. So first, what is important is that the face of God is not really a face. What they're referring to is the feeling that you get when you relate to God in this particular manner. So don't take it literally. Not that Unity people would, but just checking. We will explore the infinite face of God, the expanse. We will explore the intimate face of God through prayer. And we will explore the inner face of God that we live and breathe and have our life centered in. So it's imperative that you know, going into this series, that you need to really hear all 3. Okay? I'm not telling you to show up at church. I'm just telling you you need to hear all 3. However, showing up at church would be a good idea. And the reason that is because without a thorough understanding of the infinite, the intimate, and the inner experience of God, we do not walk away with the full picture of what God is and how we as human beings relate to our divinity. And so it's also important to understand that our relationship to the divine is not one or the other. It is really all 3 happening at the same time. However, we can't talk about all 3 at the same time. We can only really talk about one. When we're experiencing this relationship with God, we only fully experience one more profoundly than the others. And that'll all make sense in 3 weeks. So let's begin. Minister and author Paul Smith said that each of these 3 perspectives and experiences of God are different and crucial. And the knowledge of anything less than all 3, and we miss the greater picture. So as followers of the teachings of Jesus, we know firsthand that Jesus spoke about God, he spoke to God, and he also spoke to others as God. And so when we are in that level of relationship, when we are in the infinite relationship, and we are talking about God as nature, or about beauty, or an experience such as the one you had in meditation, that is our being in relationship to the infinite presence of God. When we talk about the intimate relationship of God, we are talking about communing with God, talking to God, as we sometimes do in prayer. And when we have an inner relationship of God, that's the one where we know we are having an experience of being the divine, where we know that we have God in us and God is everywhere else. So we walk as God here on earth. Jesus did that, did he not? So most religions typically only share one of these. Sometimes two, but hardly many religions do that. And so as we move forward, it's important to know that we never have just one experience, but we typically have more. We just can't always recognize it at the time. And more accurately, the religious teachings of our past probably only focused on one of these three relationships to God. At least they focused on the one that they believed was the correct one that you should experience. People who know me know that I hate that should word because we shouldn't should ourselves on anything. However, have we not all been taught that we should do something or experience God in a specific way? So they did focus on what their correct experience was, whatever our upbringing was, and so that is a part of us. It is our jumping off place in our experience of spirituality. Now, when they focus on only the one, they typically did not have a way to explain the other two. Whether or not you had an experience of the other two, they only referenced the one. Are you following me? Yeah, they couldn't tell you what that other experience was, and then they questioned whether or not you should or should not have it, which leads to a whole nother process of what a relationship with the divine really is. So unless we each look at our ultimate reality of personal experience, mine would be different from yours, and yours would be different from yours. It's our personal experience. When we look at the personal with the side perspective of our embedded theology, the old beliefs, whatever we were raised in or what our culture taught us, that filtered our current experience. However, over these 3 weeks, we should be able to clarify for you each of those experiences and in what way you were relating to God, so that you can have a broader experience of the divine. So beginning from the awareness that Jesus spoke about God, to God, and as God, let's examine what it is to experience the infinite face of God. The infinite face of God is where countless individuals, Jesus included, spoke about God as the universe. His Jewish religion was filled with stories about how mankind related to the expanse of the universe. This image of the stars and of this huge archway with the very tiny man can express to you the expansiveness of the divine. When we relate to God as nature in the countryside, where the fields are going for what seems to be forever, or when we look out into the bay or the ocean and we just see nothing but water and sky, and we feel as a tiny speck in relation to it all. This is the infinite experience of God. When we find ourselves so insignificant to all that we see in the outer. In meditation, you were guided to recall a personal experience of what it was to feel the presence of God while you were in this vast beauty. For eons, people have called this presence the glory of God. Some of us grew up with that language, but in Unity and New Thought, we know it to be the ceaseless, creative energy of the universe. That divinity as the infinite face of God is actually a metaphor for source, expression, process, and the goal of evolution. We know this energy to be constantly unfolding in greater truth, goodness, and beauty. So God has been spoken about and contemplated as the beauty of nature by every generation of humanity. We are constantly in awe of the magnificence of the planet, the mountains, the rivers, the streams, the oceans, the animals, the trees, the plants, not to mention the moon and the sky and the stars and the sun and the planets and the galaxies. Yeah, just look outside in our own courtyard and just breathe in the beauty of nature. That is the infinite face of God. So, God as infinite. The word infinite meaning limitless, endless in space, extent, or size. Impossible to measure or calculate. So the question then becomes, is your perspective of God big enough? Is your perspective of God big enough to encompass all of the universe and nature and the galaxies and the cosmos? Scientists say that the observable universe is more than 70 sextillion stars. That's 70 plus 21 zeros. I didn't bother to make a slide because it would just be overwhelming visually. 70 plus 21 zeros. The number of stars in the universe appear to be infinite, and that's only the observable portion that the scientists can see. They know it is larger than what our technology can view. But is your perspective of your God large enough to encompass, large enough to inhabit this amount of space, and large enough to continue to be evolving more and more and bigger and bigger? Because that's what's going on. So let's review some terminologies that might be helpful. These all have to do with how we as human beings view God. Theism is the view of God as an all-powerful, separate person-like being. You know, the image of the man on the cloud, far away, up there, out there, over there, anywhere but here. That one. Theism is the God that is always separate from everything. This is an infinite face of God. It's so vast, and yet the religions that utilize this perception as their number one see themselves as separate. So I ask you, is this God big enough for you today? Chances are the answer is no for you to be in the building. However, unless we take the time to look within our mind and heart to know what is it that we each believe, we may still be holding on to this outer God. It may be easy also to scoff at a God that is a man on a cloud who has personal feelings like vengeance and jealousy, demanding obedience, and to know that you will be punished by the wrath of God, whatever that is. In New Thought, we believe God is impersonal. Impersonal means it does not have personal feelings. When we in New Thought use the language of something like God is watching over us, which is written in our prayer for protection, when we in New Thought use that traditional language, we have given it a new meaning. We are simply meaning that the Creator and the source of all that is inherently a caring and creative power. No one may have told you that we changed the definition. It's important to know when we in New Thought, in Unity, in Religious Science, and other independence, when we change the meaning of the language, we may use terminology that connects us to these other philosophies, and yet in our mind, in our heart, that's not true. And so I know that it can be confusing. But when we use that language, we do not separate ourselves from the divine. It's just a different definition from our traditional and fundamentalist cousins. The next word that's important to know is pantheism. And this is the view of God that is identical to the universe and nature only. Only. Pantheism is the God of the universe, but nothing else. It is limited to creation. It's even more limiting because we, as creations of God, are still separate in this perspective. Yeah, try to wrap your head around that one, huh? It's difficult, which is why pantheism has always seemed to the traditional and fundamentalist Christians as an inadequate way to understand the God that Jesus had such a close relationship with. It didn't make sense to them. And so they let it go. They stuck with number one. In New Thought, we know that God is not separate from anything in creation, including ourselves. However, as it says, some Eastern religions, such as Hinduism, do hold to that experience. The next one that it will be helpful to know is panentheism. Panentheism is the view of God that is in everything and as everything. Everything that we see, everything that we are. This is where nothing is separate. It is the God of all creation. In panentheism, God is in the universe, and the universe is in God. Oneness. In panentheism, it sees God as a part of all that is and beyond. Go back to the 70 plus 21 zeros. That is the understanding of God. And taking that into a personal account, it is the God of inner. It is the inner face of God. It is the God that we in New Thought surround ourselves with in understanding, in experience, and internally. So I'm hoping that one sounded a little familiar. That is the teaching of Jesus. Jesus had all three levels of the divine experience in his lifetime. He did not separate one or the other as religions had taught him to do. He surrounded himself with his personal experience. He saw God in the vast universe. He felt the love of God in relationship, in times of prayer. And he walked the earth as the divine. This is the true teachings of Jesus. So our author, minister and author Paul Smith, says that Jesus pushed his own religion to evolve beyond where it was. Didn't work out well for him, however. It's always bubbled up in humanity for those of us who have wrapped our minds and hearts around the multiple ways we can relate to the divine. The divine in the infinite, the divine in the intimate, and the divine in the inner. Jesus spoke about God. He spoke to God, and he spoke as God. We are called to do the same, and we do, but do you have a clarity about it? Do you understand that it's all of the above, not one or another? Or you should have this experience, or you should have that experience. It's all of the above. And who knows? It could be more. As we continually evolve as spiritual beings, time will tell. The next great spiritual explorer could be sitting in this room or in another Unity or New Thought church somewhere around the country, around the globe, to share with us their expanded experience of the divine so that we too can move beyond our current understanding. Doesn't that sound cool? Yeah. That's what Jesus did in his day. And we are called to do the same. Enjoy the journey. Namaste.